And so in the final Catelyn chapter of our story, we find that they are making their way to Riverrun by crossing the river in boats, Robb riding with Catelyn and Braywind in one alongside Theon Greyjoy, while her uncle Brynden and the Great John and Lord Karstark ride in a second boat behind them. Arriving inside, they are met by Edmure and Lord Titus Blackwood, and they console her immediately as word has reached them of what has happened to Ned. It is revealed to us that Lord Tully is in actual fact dying, and Catelyn questions why word was not sent to her sooner of this, but Edmure reminds her that he forbade it, as he didn't want his enemy to know he was dying. The realm in such trouble, he feared that if the Lannisters, or perhaps even the Freys, knew of how bad he was, it would cause them to jump up and take his territory. And we find that Lord Tully has had his bed moved onto the balcony where he looks out over the rivers, and we get a callback to the previous chapter where Catelyn always once would watch out for him returning, and so he himself comments that he has been watching out for her returning to him. It is unclear what exactly is killing Lord Tully, but he comments that the crabs are in his belly and they are pinching, always pinching day and night with fierce claws, and he has to take dream wine and milk of the poppy to sleep in order to deal with the pain. And it is revealed that this is in actual fact the day after the attack on Jaime's camp, as Hoster recalls that he sat last night and watched the camps get destroyed. Lord Tully is surprised at the fact that Brynden has returned and refers to him as him with a faint whisper, surprised that he has come back from the Vale, and questions whether Lysa has also come back. We find that the source of the conflict between Hoster and Brynden appears to have been over a marriage pact, as it is noted that Blackfish was intended to take a wife, and Hoster was so dead set on this that he's even iron fixed on it on his deathbed. He was commanded to wed, and they had picked out a Redwine girl in order to wed him. However, Bethany Redwine married Lord Rowan years ago instead, and now has 3 children. Seeking Robb, Catelyn finds Theon in the hall telling tale of the Whispering Wood, and comments that when Robb and his direwolf took on the Lannister forces, they must have assumed that the others were upon them, which again reinforces the idea in this world that the others basically exist in their mythos as beings which take people. When Catelyn enters the Godswood to find Robb, we get a very interesting detail here, as at the start of our story, Catelyn made it clear that the weirwoods were all cut down south of the neck. Yet here, in Riverrun, her home keep, there is a slender weirwood in the Godswood, which seems like the kind of thing that would be extremely important when you consider that there are supposedly no weirwoods south of the neck, especially when we find out in this story there are actually quite a few of them. And we find that alongside Robb here are many of his bannermen. Curiously enough, all of these houses appear to be those of the older Northern religion, and potentially the ones which are descended from the giants, as we get the Umbers, the Karstarks, the Mormonts, and the Glovers. And curiously enough as well, the Blackwoods are here, and they happen to be one of the few known houses in the south who not only have a weirwood in their keep, but are also apparently originally from the north. While waiting for them to finish their prayers, Catelyn remembers when she and Lysa were younger, and Lysa was no older than Arya, and Baelish also at the time was present, and younger still than what Lysa was, and yet they would take turns playing at kissing, which may be the origin of Peter's infatuation with her and Lysa's infatuation with Peter. Robb reveals to Catelyn that word has reached them of Renly claiming his crown, and this shocks Catelyn as Stannis himself has not even put his claim forward yet. And we find that upon calling council in Riverrun, we gather up the lords who command all of the Riverlands, who have, since having fled from Jaime's force, are now regrouping, as Carl Vance is now present, as he is now a lord following the death of his father beneath the Golden Tooth, and he is escorted by Mark Piper, who together bring forward the new Lord Darry, son of Sir Raymond, who is a lad who is no older than Bran. Now we find Lord Jonas Bracken also arrives from the ruins of Stonehenge and takes his seat as far away from Blackwood as possible, given that they have an endless feud since the dawn of time. And so we find that Roose Bolton still has his army currently keeping Tywin from heading north, and that Helm Tallheart and Walder Frey still hold the twins as well. However, they note that Tywin's army has now crossed the Trident and is making its way to Harrenhal, while we also find that there are now two kings in the realm, Joffrey and Renly. Now, dispute rages amongst the lords here, as some would counsel to take out Tywin now before he has time to regroup, whereas Mark Piper cautions that they should just strike west to Castle Rock and take it out of the equation. However, we find a third option posited by House Bracken, that they should join forces instead with Renly. Now, Robb takes exemption to this, as he notes that Joffrey is supposedly Robert's true heir, and so if and when he intends to end Joffrey's life, it is not Renly who will inherit the throne, it is Joffrey's younger brother, Tommen. Mark Piper, however, stands in support of the idea of Renly being king, and notes that if they join their forces to Renly, they can easily gather the houses of all 6 of the opposing lands in a force against the Lannisters, outnumbering them 6-1, implying that they strongly believe that Dorne will come into the fold. Curiously, this points us to the fact that Dorne, who have so far not really been active players in the story, appear to be pushing figures behind the scenes. Now, given that the entire point of the North coming south was to free Ned, it is questionable now what their true goal is as a force, and Catelyn laments this fact to the lords, as no amount of vengeance can bring him back. And now that they are openly in rebellion against the crown, what is their purpose in fighting? Catelyn decrees that they must sue for peace and end the fighting, so she can have her family back and they can all have lives that they can continue to live. But the lords are not happy with this, as they point out, if there is no resolution, what exactly did they fight and die for? They need something to compensate for their losses. Then they lament the fact that if they make peace with the Lannisters, then that makes them enemies to Renly and his faction, and should they win, they would then be at the mercy of them for opposing him. And we see once again that the Piper and Darry faction here strongly oppose any course of action which would lead to Lannisters being in charge, as they appear to have some form of unbridled Lannister hate. And so we find that the houses which take the old gods as their faith are the ones that then raise the next idea for Robb: secession from the Seven Kingdoms. As they point out, Renly, Stannis, Joffrey, they are nothing to them. Why should they obey their rule all the way in the north? Pointing out that it was only since Aegon the Conqueror took the Seven Kingdoms that they bowed to the Dragon Lords. And as far as they are concerned, there are no more Dragon Lords, so why are they still bowing to the throne? And so all who are gathered here decide to pledge Robb as the king in the north, and so their new driving goal for their faction is the secession from the Seven Kingdoms, which is curious, as even the River Lords themselves join in this chant, which makes me wonder if, given their successful completion of this plan, would the River Lords themselves also be part of this now freed North?